All right, guys, welcome back. Another Bleacher Report Live. I'm Jake Ellenbogen. And as always, you can follow me on social media, all social media at JK Bogan. I do a Rams podcast called Downtown Rams, as well as another Rams podcast called Believe in Rams. And I go live after every Rams game on JE Live over on my YouTube channel. You can just find it, Jake Ellenbogen. So we're here today to talk about the Rams and how the 5-6 Rams, who are now on their first 2-game winning streak of the season, how they can sneak into the playoffs. I gotta say, it was really interesting. I booted up and New York Times. They have a really nice interactive. I guess this is somewhat of a predictive model, but also simulation. And the Rams yesterday, when I opened this thing up, it was around 25%. So they do updates based on the simulation and everything. So when they beat the Cardinals yesterday and all the numbers went into the system and, with New York Times, the Rams moved all the way up to 37%. So I saw 27% yesterday. So this thing is getting updated. And really, it goes to show you that this is not any longer a leap of faith, if you will. There is a real shot for the Rams to have some success and get into the playoffs, and they could do something in the playoffs. There is an interactive poll. I'm very curious to see how you guys feel. Definitely use that poll. I have a yes or no question. Will the Rams make the playoffs? I'm going to say I think they do. Okay. But let's talk about it. Let's go through it. So the Rams right now are sitting, this one has 38%. If you refresh more simulations, it kind of, fluctuates. But pretty much right now, this is the percentage we're looking at, 37. Okay. New York Times has an interactive thing here, which is great. I mean, it's like a playoff machine, but I really like this one the most, because it gives you the percentage and it displays it immediately. It doesn't show you how the playoff picture would work. It just kind of shows you the division standings. But this is important here. This number is a big deal. So if the Rams were to win this upcoming week against a banged up Browns team that's not going to have Nick Chubb, their starting running back, it's not going to have Deshaun Watson, their starting quarterback, might not even have their second string quarterback, their backup quarterback who was playing in Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the 5th rounder out of UCLA. They might not have Myles Garrett, although he does look to be okay. And they might not have Amari Cooper, who left with a rib injury. Now, this team, the Rams, they are interesting because throughout the year, they've been in every game just about, but it's been a matter of them finishing games and, just being able to play 4 quarters, play 2 halves, be able to play all 3 phases. You talk about special teams, defense, and offense. And I think really what I've been saying all year long, if you've been following my content, is that it really comes down to Kyren Williams. Okay. Really does come down to Kyren Williams. They needed him. They are 1-3 without him. They're 4-3 with him. So that's why they are 5-6 right now. They have a plus win percentage with Kyren Williams now, and they have a chance to add to that this Sunday at SoFi Stadium. I believe they're going to. And so with a win against Cleveland, this is now up to 47% chance of making the playoffs without even touching down here. Now, if tonight's game is really interesting, because if they somehow get some help from the Bears, this thing can go up. And now you're at a 50% chance that the Bears take down the Vikings, and the Rams are a Seahawks loss away here from being in the playoffs up until this Packers game, as you can see right here. Because the Packers do have the head-to-head tiebreaker. The Rams have full custody of the tiebreaker over the Seahawks. If Dallas, who's one of the best teams, if not the best team at home over the last 3 years, if they pull off a home win on a short week against Seattle, although it's not a short week because they both played on Thanksgiving, but if they pull off a win, then the Rams could be above 50% chance of making the playoffs. And at this moment in time, without this game happening on Sunday Night Football, the Packers and Chiefs, the Rams would move in to the 7th seed, take that over from Seattle. They would be 6-6. So by virtue, they would beat Seattle in the tiebreaker. And then you look at the Packers and Chiefs game. And if the Chiefs win that, the Rams hold on to that and their position goes up to 55% chance of making the playoffs. And that's just week 13. So there is a lot of opportunity here for the Rams. There's 6 more games ahead. The worst 6-game stretch of Sean McVay's career was last year without Cooper Kupp, without Matthew Stafford, without, Aaron Donald. Okay. This team won 2 out of the 6 games. So they still were able to win some games down the stretch. They went 2-4. For the most part, Sean McVay teams go 4-2 or 3-3, except for the 2018 team that went 5-1 in the last 6 games. The Rams going 4-2 the last 6 games of the season would likely give them a good shot of making the playoffs. But if we just go through and do that right now, what kind of shot does that give them? And that's just taking away these, because these games haven't happened yet. So let's go back here, sitting around this percentage. So if the Rams do say win against the Browns, they lose to the Ravens, they beat the Commanders, the Saints, the Giants, and lose to the 49ers, the Rams currently, without messing around with anything, would have a 72% chance of making the playoffs. That's a 4-2 record the next 6 games. And that's about on par for a Sean McVay football team. They've never gone 6-0 in the last 6 games of the season. Not even any of the Super Bowl teams. As a matter of fact, they went 3-3 in 2021. So I believe 3-3. Might have been 4-2. But 2018, they went 5-1. So let's say if they go 5-1, what does that do? Well, it almost all but assures they would make the playoffs. As a matter of fact, 98% chance of making the playoffs. But as we can see over here, they would have a 2% chance of being out, 88% chance of a wild card, and a 10% chance of actually taking the division. So that would be crazy. Here's the deal. Realistically speaking, let's take a look at the games they are favored in. They're currently favored in the Browns game. They're going to be favored in the Commanders game. They're likely going to be favored in the Saints game, and they're likely going to be favored in the Giants game. So that leaves these 2 that they're not favored in. So they lose these 2. And again, this is going to hover around, early 70s, late 60s percentages here. So what's the deal? And, if you're out there and trying to figure out who to cheer for and whatnot, what situations, scenarios to root for, how do you go about doing that? Well, that's what I'm here for. So they win against the Browns. Really, they don't have to beat the Browns, the Ravens, the 49ers. The teams they have to beat, I mean, they have to win games, let's be honest here. But they do have 2 games that they could lose and still have a good chance. What you don't want to lose to, this Saints team that right now is going to be a problem because they are outside of their division. They would be, vying for a wild card opportunity. They lost that tiebreaker to the Falcons. So you don't want to give them a tiebreaker. You don't want to give the Giants to the Commanders. Not saying the Giants and the Commanders have really much of a shot, but this is also a wins in common games thing. What I mean by that, also conference games, is that tiebreakers are important here. And for the Rams to hang on to any sort of tiebreaker, they're going to have to beat teams head to head. So they have those head to head tiebreakers. Or if they don't just do that, they're also going to need conference record, because tiebreakers also conference record and common games. And so the teams that are trying to break ties against the Rams, they might have beaten the Commanders. They might have beaten the Saints, the Giants. If the Rams don't have those wins, that hurts them. So if you're going to lose to anybody, you'd want to lose probably these next 2 games and win out. You don't want to lose at all, but the Browns and Ravens are in the AFC. They don't have as much to do with the NFC playoffs as the others do. So let's just say Rams take down the Browns. I think they're going to do it. I think they found something. Okay. I said it in September. I believe it was September 18th. I had a video on it. Kyren Williams unlocked the offense, and we saw it again. So really, what do we make of this? Kyren Williams missed 4 games. He missed 4 games. So what do we make of this? Well, here's the thing. Kyren Williams, despite missing 4 games, is top 24 of all running backs. Top 24 in every metric. Everything. And he's top 5 in a bunch of metrics. As a matter of fact, he's number 1 in yards created after contact per rush. He's playing really good football right now. And they were out there. They were able to blow out the Cardinals on the road, a team that brought it down to the wire against the Ravens, a team that brought it down to the wire, against, the Browns. And I just think what's important to realize here, this is also a team that beat the Cowboys yesterday, might have been the start of something big. Okay. This might be a run. Now, we don't know for sure. They could falter against the Browns. They could lose to the Ravens. They could drop one of the Commanders, Saints, or Giants games. However, the Rams have a winning record when Kyren Williams plays and a losing record when he doesn't. Kyren Williams is one of the best running backs in the NFL right now. And if he stays healthy and this Rams team continues to let him cook, the possibilities are endless when you look at what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball. The defense has given him a shot in just about any game this year. So it's up to the offense. Kyren Williams in the lineup gives them, they average about 25 points per game. Without Kyren Williams, they average about 14. So think about that. 14 points a game without Kyren Williams. What kind of offensive production is that? Well, that's one of the bottom, I would say that's one of the bottom teams in the league at that point. But with Kyren, they're an above average offense. They don't have to be an elite offense. And who's to say they can't? They got Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell. We saw it this week. So what can they do? Well, they beat the Browns. This thing goes up. So let's look at this. So Bears, for rooting interest this week, you're going to want to root for the Bears tonight on Monday Night Football. Will help the Rams out a little bit, not a ton, but it's good to get that Vikings loss out of the way in case the Packers don't lose. The Packers do have the tiebreaker over the Rams. So the Rams need the Packers to lose the game. If the Packers beat the Chiefs, they're in really good position to potentially win out for the year. So think about this. You want to get this taken care of right away. You want the Vikings to lose a game. That way, if there is some sort of tiebreaker that you're losing to the Packers, you can still take that 7 seed potentially if the Vikings do fall apart. So this is, in a perfect world, you'd want the Bears to win. You want the Cowboys to win, obviously, against Seattle. Cowboys have the 5th seed locked up. They have the tiebreaker over the Rams. They're not really in the Rams' way. If the Rams win out, maybe that's a different discussion. But right now, we're just trying to get into the playoffs. And so you want Seattle to lose. Rams have the tiebreaker. Seattle drops to 6 losses. Rams have 6. There you go. Another one here, the Lions. The Lions aren't in the Rams' way at all. They got 8 wins. They're going to probably win that division. So the Rams don't have to worry about them. They do, however, have to worry about the Saints a little bit. So this might not be a huge deal, but perfect world, you'd want the Lions to win that game. Lions win that game. Now, okay, we're at 58%. Rams beat the Browns. Cowboys beat the Seahawks. Lions beat the Saints. The Falcons and Jets, again, the Falcons right now have the division lead, but it doesn't hurt for them to lose in case they lose the division lead. So we'll go with the Jets here. And then we'll also go with the Panthers over the Buccaneers. They did just fire Frank Reich. We'll see if that lights a fire under them. They are on the road. We'll see. But that also can't hurt, knocking the Buccaneers. That would pretty much knock them out of the playoff race entirely. Dolphins would knock the Commanders out of the playoff race entirely. And now this game right here, if the Chiefs beat the Packers, I mean, that's great for the Rams. So you're at 57%, almost 60% at the end of week 13, chance of making the playoffs. So then you move on to week 14. What's the perfect scenario? Well, in this case, it would be the Buccaneers who have more losses than the Falcons. Buccaneers win this. Rams have the tiebreaker over them. Then, you move up a percentage. Again, it's not a huge deal, right? Same thing with the Bears. Bears win. They're still in it, but then the Lions aren't in the way. So them beating the Bears, now you're up to 61% without even playing your week 14 matchup. Then you look at the Rams and Ravens. This is a tough one. I think I've said all year the Rams have no chance of winning this game. I don't know if that's necessarily true. The Ravens haven't really, they didn't dominate last night by any stretch. The Rams have a shot, and they have a shot as long as they run the football and they play the type of football they did last week, because they could beat anybody in the league. They could win a Super Bowl if they play that style of play, the all three phases level of football, just the team level of football, the just complementary football. If they play like that every week, they could win it all. But it's a matter of consistency. Can you play like that every week? That's to be decided. So if the Rams beat the Ravens, now this goes up. And without even getting into week 15, you're already over 80% likely for the playoffs. If the Raiders beat the Vikings here, this is massive for the Rams. You're up to 86%. And then the 49ers beat Seattle, and you're feeling good right now. Giants beat the Packers, and now you can just a few games get in the way. You could almost get to 90% by the end of week 14. So week 15, now you have the Vikings and the Bengals. Bengals win that game. Now it's over 90, right? You have the Bears and Browns. Browns win that game, hurts the Bears' chances. Now you're at 93%. The Falcons and Panthers. The Panthers win. It might help them a little bit. It's not going to help them a lot. Still, one of those teams has to win their division. So you're going to have that regardless. Buccaneers beating the Packers would be huge as well. And then this game, obviously, Rams Commanders. Based on this, they'd have a 97% chance of making the playoffs. And if the Eagles did beat Seattle, that would go up to 98 going into week 16, Thursday Night Football, where the Rams would basically clinch the playoffs at this point. They would be at 9-6 going into week 17 against the Giants. 9-6. Seattle will be 6-8 based on this. Again, how likely is all this to happen? To have all these teams lose, it's unlikely. But this is what you want to root for. This is really what it comes down to. So let's just look at a realistic approach. Okay. Let's use some realism here. Let's just go through and let's try to make this as realistic of a simulation as we can to kind of give you an idea of where the Rams, the position they could be in, right? So we unchecked all those boxes. We use this. I'm going to say the Vikings win tonight. I'd like to see the Bears win. I think the Vikings are going to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears pulled it off. So let's say this. You got the Vikings win that. Then I think the Cowboys beat Seattle. Okay. I think then you have the Lions and Saints. I think the Lions win that game. Just looking at NFC games, of course. This is in New Jersey. So I'm going to take the Jets over the Falcons. Falcons don't really play well on the road. We'll give it to the Bucs there over the Panthers. I think the Rams beat the Browns. And I think the Dolphins beat the Commanders. And I think the Chiefs beat the Packers. That puts the Rams at 50% chance of making the playoffs. This is a realistic scenario, I think. Makes a lot of sense. Rams go to 6-6. Seattle falls 6-6. And the Packers fall to 5-7. So week 14, realistically, I think the Rams lose this game to the Ravens currently. Maybe, like, depending on how the Browns game goes, who knows? I might change my opinion. Buccaneers, Falcons, it's not like it makes a huge difference, but I think you'd just rather have them run away with it at this point. So the Falcons for the division lead. Vikings and Raiders, and the Falcons are at home, so I'm going to take the Falcons in that one. Oh, sorry, Saints and Panthers. I'm going to take the Saints at home. I'm going to take the Raiders at home against the Vikings. I think that's going to be a tough matchup for them. I think the 49ers beat Seattle. And then I think the Packers beat the Giants. Where are the Rams at right now? Well, they're at 42% based on this loss to the Ravens. So right now they're 6-7 and they're out of the playoffs because the Vikings and the Packers would have the 6 and 7 seeds. So let's go to week 15. Week 15, we have the Vikings and Bengals. I'm going to take the Bengals here. They're at home. I thought they showed something against the Steelers without Joe Burrow. I think the Vikings on the road would be a problem. So I'll take the Bengals and Lou Anarumo's defense. Then the Panthers and Falcons. I'm going to take the Panthers at home. Coaching firing. I think there's going to be a fire lit under this team, and I think they might steal some games down the stretch. Buccaneers and Packers. I'm going to take the Packers in this one. I think the Packers do win that. Rams, Commanders. I'm going to take the Rams. And then the Seahawks and Eagles, I'm going to take the Eagles. So realistically speaking, the Rams have a 57% chance of making the playoffs. And this is with them losing to the Ravens. Week 16, Rams Saints. This percentage goes up. They win on Thursday Night Football 76% in week 16. Now, the other ones here, Seattle and Tennessee, I got Seattle winning that. Okay. So Seattle would be 7-8. The Rams would be 8-7. Keep in mind, they're basically 2 games ahead because they have the tiebreaker. Now the Lions and Vikings. This is tough. The Vikings win this. This is a completely different thing, but I'm going to take the Lions in this. I think the Lions can beat the Vikings there, and they go to 81%. Packers, Panthers. I kind of see the Panthers. They could pull this off later in the season. I'm going to go with the Packers just to be safe. Doesn't really matter because the Vikings have dropped some games here down the stretch, the Raiders game, the Lions game. And now you're looking at the Rams at 8-7 as the 7th seed and the Packers at 8-7 as the 6th seed. So we move on to week 17 and the Rams, obviously, if they take care of business against the Giants here, we're going up past 90%. And now all that really matters in this game, all that really impacts, if the Packers win this game, based on this realism here, the Rams are in. If the Packers lose this, and they're 100%, this clinches it for the Rams. They would be the 7th seed. The Packers would be the 8th seed. The Rams would be 9-7. The Packers would be 9-7 as the 6th seed. If the Vikings win this game, however, it makes things a little complicated. They go down to 88% with the final week of the season. Lions at home taking on the Vikings, the Bears taking on the Packers at home, and the Rams on the road to take on the 49ers. So if the Rams did get into a scenario like this, and be honest with you, I think it is possible the Vikings beat the Packers. The Vikings could win this game against the Lions, although it's at Ford Field. I think the Lions would just want to wrap this thing up. That would put the Rams in the playoffs. Before this game even mattered, the Rams would be locked in 10-7 or 9-8. It's over. However, if the Vikings win this, it gets a little interesting. Now it's a little dicey. So it's 57% chance. Then you have the Bears and Packers. If the Bears beat the Packers here, the Rams would be in the playoffs. If the Bears lost to the Packers, now the Rams have a 22% chance of making the playoffs, and it's a win and you're in scenario. So the Rams, it would be do or die. The 49ers would have a chance to knock the Rams out of the playoffs before it even happens in this game, almost down to the same exact scenario as 2021 when the Rams played the 49ers. They played the 49ers to end the season, and the Rams had already made the playoffs. The 49ers needed to win and get in, and if they lost, they would have missed it. The Rams lost to the 49ers. They ended up playing the NFC title game, and the 49ers lost to the Rams. Rams win this game, however, they finish 10-7, and they make the playoffs. And, of course, because we didn't pick really any of the 49er games, that would put the 49ers at 9-4, and depending on how the rest of the year went, the Rams still have a 5% chance of hosting a wild card game and winning the NFC West. So interesting stuff here. I would say really you're just going to want the Vikings and Packers to lose unless until they play each other. And then in that regard, whoever's the biggest threat, you'd want them to lose. So is this possible? I think it's likely. And if the Rams beat the Browns and Ravens, if they were to go 3-0 in these upcoming 3 games, it would be massive. Now, can they do it? I understand this seems like a little bit of a stretch, but I think they found something, guys. I think this team is ready. They're going to go on a run. They're undefeated since the bye. So they're 2-0 since the bye. They won their first November game. They've won 2 now. First time since 2020. They didn't win last year. They didn't win the Super Bowl season. So they've won in November. And Sean McVay teams, again, 4-2, 3-3. That's about where they are. The last 6 games of the year. The Rams, really, I don't see a scenario in which they make the playoffs losing 3 games. Okay. They're going to have to win 4 or more to be in the race. And it really, again, it comes down to this. They beat the Browns. This thing, without putting anybody into a scenario, 48%. They beat the Ravens. Now this thing is hovering around 70%. They beat the Commanders. This thing goes up to almost 80%. They beat the Saints. Now we're talking in the 90s. They beat the Giants, and you're pretty much in at 10-6 at that point with a game left to go. Now, I do think they beat the Browns. Again, I think they lose to the Ravens. I think they win 3 straight after that. And the 49er game's kind of a toss-up. And you're sitting there with the 76% chance of making the playoffs. Now, the question that might be asked here is, Jake, how good is this team? Can this team actually win a playoff game? Can they? Can they do it? Well, I'll say this. I think they can. And the reason I think they can is because I think they showed you yesterday that even when you take away the passing attack, you take away the deep passing attack, they hit on a Tutu Atwell explosive 40 yards down the field. But the same time, let's talk about it. Cooper Kupp held in check. Puka Nacua held in check. It was a lot of short passes, right? Well, when you take away that deep passing game, how do you respond? The Rams responded by hitting him over the head repeatedly with the screen game, and it worked. You had over 60 yards of offense, receiving wise from Kyren Williams. You had a two-headed monster backfield. Williams went almost 150 yards rushing, and you had over 70 yards rushing by Royce Freeman back-to-back games. He had a touchdown this one too. And it just kind of goes to show you, this team was able to win despite the fact Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua really were held in check. Tutu Atwell stretched the field. Now, say what you will, because I know people are talking about this. What about Kyren Williams and, the lack of 8-man or 8+ man boxes? Teams aren't really respecting him in the run game. I don't think that's really it. I think it's the scheme. I think it's having Cooper Kupp and Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua. I think teams have to be on their toes. It's pick your poison, So if teams do decide, hey, we're going to put 8-9 guys in the box, it's different than the Packer game. The Packer game, you could do that, and it worked for the Packers because you had Brett Rippon at quarterback. They didn't respect Brett Rippon. So they're like, the only thing we know you can do is run the football, and we're not going to let you. But if you try that against the Rams now, when Stafford's healthy, you're going to be in some tough problems there because Stafford can make things happen. Sean McVay can draw up plays where he can get a guy open on a rub route. He can use, Tutu Atwell on a clear out, gets Kupp open underneath, or Puka Nacua. And that's the problem. And that's why this team is truly one of the more dangerous teams now down the stretch here. If they get in, this winning streak hard, if they beat the Browns, if they beat the Ravens, and they have the Commanders, Saints, and Giants left on their schedule, then you have the Niners. But if they're able to win the next 2 games here, and you're staring at them right now at 7-6, going into probably the easiest 3-game stretch of the season, if they can pull this thing off, they're going to be dangerous in the playoffs. And I can't stress that enough. I don't think this team is a good matchup for the Lions at all. I think we saw what Jared Goff did on Thanksgiving against the Packers and saw there's an opportunity there. You can force turnovers. You can pressure him. Having Aaron Donald come up the gut, Jared Goff is not going to be able to step up into any sort of pocket. And the way these guys are playing week in and week out, you look at Kobe Turner. If it's not him, it's Byron Young. If it's not him, then it's somebody else. Ernest Jones is playing really well. So look, the way the secondary is playing, the way the defense is playing, the way Kyren Williams has played this year when he's been healthy, and we saw Stafford throw 4 touchdowns last week, this team would pose a serious threat to anybody in the playoffs. They have the benefit that most other teams do not. First off, they have a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Nobody in the Super Bowl, nobody in the NFC has that. They have 2, but we won't. Carson Wentz didn't play in said Super Bowl, but they have a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Matthew Stafford. Goff has been a Super Bowl, Jalen Hurts. That's it. That is it as far as Super Bowl experience, right? You look at playoff experience, Matthew Stafford and Jalen Hurts are probably the best playoff quarterbacks left in the field. Dak has struggled. Brock Purdy, I thought, looked pretty good before he got hurt. So we'll see there. The Rams and Niners. Rams know the Niners well. The Niners know the Rams well. I mean, think about it though. If the Rams are playing the Niners in the playoffs, the Niners are going to be David, or they're going to be Goliath, and the Rams are going to be David. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. So at that point, you're playing with house money. The Niners are supposed to be a Super Bowl team. They've, acquired all these pieces. So the Rams, they're not supposed to be there by a lot of people. If they were there, who knows what would happen? They could play the Niners in the first round. They could play the Lions. I think they'd beat the Lions. Can you imagine that? Matthew Stafford going to Ford Field, playing against Jared Goff. I mean, the script writes itself, right? I mean, at that point. So, actually get a game if we make it, Jamie asked in the comment section. Yeah, I think the Rams could get a game. I think the scariest thing about this team is they should only get better. They're young, right? They have some stars that are older, but they're young for the most part. As this team continues to build on their first true winning streak of the year, this team could get really scary really fast. And so what you don't want is to end up as the Lions of 2022 who just missed the playoffs. You want to get this team in the playoffs and see, first off, get that experience for a lot of these young guys that will be on the team next year, first off. Second, get in the dance and see what you're capable of, because anything can happen. This isn't just a young team with a young quarterback that's never been there. No, this is a young team with superstar players that played the best game of their career, or one of the best games of their career, when it was required to. Stafford's playoff run was outstanding. He had 10 touchdowns. He was great in the playoffs. He was huge against Tampa. He was huge against the Niners, and he was huge against the Bengals, despite the fact he hardly had anybody to throw to. Cooper Kupp was the Super Bowl MVP. Aaron Donald could have been the Super Bowl MVP. And Ernest Jones, in his first season, started in the Super Bowl and had some huge moments in that game, breaking up a fourth down, stopping Joe Mixon dead in his tracks. I mean, you talk about that experience, that matters. So we'll see what happens. A lot can happen. There's 6 games left to go. How do you guys see it happening? I mean, I think that, it's kind of all over the board right now. The Rams still have a shot to win the division. Now, very, very unlikely they do. But let's look at this. If they were to win out here without even touching the 49ers games, the 49ers have a 74% chance of winning that division. The Rams have a 26% chance of winning the division. So who knows? I mean, again, anything can happen. It's going to be interesting. And I think you got to have a lot of credit given over to Kyren Williams, who I think is really keeping this alive. I've said it before. In my opinion, they really needed him. He is the engine to the offense. He's the closest thing we've seen to Todd Gurley. And he's not the athlete Todd Gurley has. He doesn't have the acceleration, the explosiveness, but hey, Kyren Williams is a damn good running back, and he's arguably a top 5 running back. That's good enough. We saw it yesterday. Yeah, he got chased down. That's still a 50-plus yard run, and they still scored on that. So Rams just got to keep things going. It doesn't just start with the players. I thought the coaches, did a great job. I thought Raheem Morris had his defense ready to go. I thought Sean McVay's play calling was excellent, aside from maybe 2 plays, and that's getting picky. I thought he was great. I thought it was a masterclass. And yeah, it was against the Arizona Cardinals, but you would think it'd be the opposite. The Cardinals know the Rams. The Cardinals saw Kyren Williams firsthand. How did they allow that again? Maybe the Rams just are turning a corner. That's all it takes. So we'll see. A lot comes down to the Browns game. They win the Browns game. Depending on how they win it, that'll change the dialogue a little bit. I mean, think about that. Is that if they win it, the fact is they're around 50% chance of making the playoffs without even doing anything, without anybody losing, anybody winning, whatever. Now, if they win that like they did against the Cardinals, that's when the dialogue starts to change. That's when the narratives start to come out. It's not just the percentage here. Because here's the thing, a win is a win. Just get the thing done. That is going to help you get in the playoffs. It's going to help you with your percentage. But the way I see it is a win margin, and how you win, it still matters a little bit and can get you some momentum. So hopefully the Rams build upon the momentum that they had. I think the thing that's going to help this team is they've shown the ability to win on the road. They have what it takes. They don't mind being the underdog. And I would not count this team out for a second. And if they win against the Browns and Ravens, this is going to get really, really fascinating really quick. So that's all I got for you guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and you guys can follow me at JK Bogan if you liked anything I had to say, or you want to tweet at me, or just any sort of social media. My DMs are always open. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Also, be sure to follow me on here, the Bleacher Report app at JK Bogan as well. And I'll see you guys soon. Later, folks.